Hey everybody, Hake Hardware here, and in this video we are going to go over how to install the FE or FriendlyElec. I am going to call it FriendlyElectric because for some reason my brain shorts out when I just say FriendlyElec. The Ubuntu Noble Minimal version to the eMMC, so internal storage of the CM3588, using a microSD card. So there's a few different images available from FriendlyElec for uh, operating systems you can install. And I have a lot of videos on them. So there's Debian Bookworm. This is going to be CLI only, which I actually prefer. There's Bullseye Minimal. So if you want Debian with a XFCE desktop environment, this is a good option. It doesn't install any recommended packages by default, so you can choose exactly what you want. And then there's Ubuntu Noble Minimal, which is a desktop environment using Wayland and GNOME, uh, and it's 24.04 for Ubuntu. And again, no pre-installed packages, which I like. I don't even do any of the videos for like the ones with pre-installed packages, but it's probably similar. So there is a Ubuntu Noble Desktop and Debian Bullseye Desktop options where there's more packages installed by default. Okay, so a few notes on this. I always SSH and handle everything over SSH with my CM3588s. This video is kind of set and geared towards people that just SSH into these and aren't going to be using the desktop environments. There's nothing wrong with using the desktop environment, it's just not what I do. So just a note, not all these steps are necessarily required if you're just going to be using the desktop environment. I set up a lot of things like I disable suspend because if I'm in the terminal, it will actually suspend the system even if I'm using it, which is super annoying. I just do a few things that maybe aren't necessary. So when we're going through these different steps, like you just make a decision whether you need to or not. It's kind of up to you. So as far as prerequisites go, you're going to of course need a CM3588. You'll need a micro SD card so you can flash it with the image. You'll need a micro SD card reader so that you can actually plug it into your system and flash it. And then you'll need whatever OS image you want to install. In this case, it's going to be Ubuntu Noble Minimal. And as far as getting the images, it's pretty easy. Electric, I'm going to say it both ways, has a really nice wiki. I link directly to the downloads, but there's actually a lot more on this wiki, so feel free to check it out. You'll just click the download link, Google Drive, and because we're going to be doing, we'll select official images, and because we're going to be doing SD to eMMC, you can actually run the OSs straight off the SD card. I don't recommend it if you have eMMC storage. We're going to be using that folder, and then here's all the different images that they have available. You'll scroll down to Ubuntu, so you can see there's Jammy. Like if you want X11 instead of Wayland, um, you can do an older version if you want. I prefer to use Noble, and it's going to be minimal. So minimal, again, no pre-installed packages. Desktop is likely going to have some pre-installed packages. And actually in the wiki, they explain the different things here. So this one uses a slightly different desktop environment. This one's got GNOME and Wayland. This one, GNOME and Wayland, but with recommended software. So you just come in here and figure out like which one makes the most sense for you. I do have videos on at least the ones that I use. And also, like if you ever need to reinstall Open Media Vault or Proxmox, if you want to use that, those are also possible images that you can use in here. I thought it was really cool to have Proxmox in here, although I don't I don't know what I would use Proxmox for this. So if anybody plans to use Proxmox, let me know what you guys are using it for. I'm always interested in what people are using these boards for. Okay, so you'll just right click and do download. I've already downloaded it. I've already flashed it. But if you're following the guide, there's two ways. So if you have Ubuntu, you can follow this guide. I've got a video for it and everything. It's pretty easy. There's just a few commands. You got to prep the drive and then, or prep the micro SD card and then flash it. Windows, it's a little bit more involved. I use, uh, what is it, diskpart to just kind of like format the drive. And really the hardest part of this is just making sure you don't accidentally format a drive that you don't want to format or uh, wipe out anything that you don't want to wipe out. Just always make sure when you're dealing with like wiping out drives that you're backing up things that are important because you may accidentally wipe out something you don't want. So just be very careful when following these guides. Anyways, we're gonna go follow one of those two, prepare your micro SD card, come back here, and we're gonna flash the eMMC, which is super easy. The biggest thing that I see people have issues with is that the CM3588 has 3 HDMI ports. Two of them are an output, so you can hook them up to a monitor. One of them is an input, so if you plug your HDMI cable into the input and then plug the other end into the monitor, you're just going to get a black screen. So if you want to be sure you're using an output, just use the middle port. If you need two monitors, then yeah, you're going to have to kind of figure out which one. I can't remember if it's the left or the right. But yeah, the middle port is always going to be an output. One thing that's cool about these eFlasher images from FriendlyElec is that they will just flash the eMMC when you boot up the system. So you're going to put the card in, you're going to turn on the system, and you're automatically going to see that it starts to flash. There'll be a progress bar, and then it'll tell you to shut down when it's done. Don't forget to remove the micro SD card. If you leave it in and you boot it back up, it's just going to flash it again, and you're going to turn it off and boot it back up. So save yourself a couple of minutes and just make sure you remove the card before proceeding and booting the system. All right, so for the first boot, like I said before, I always just SSH into my CM3588s. So if you're just using a keyboard and mouse and a monitor directly connected to the CM3588, you don't really need to do any of the SSH steps, and your steps might be slightly different. But the first thing I always do is just find the IP address of the system. You can check out your router, look for the DHCP leases, and you're going to see one labeled CM3588. So I'm going to SSH into it. You can use just the regular CLI doing SSH, like if you're in Linux. Of course, if you're in Windows, I recommend just going down here and getting Termius. I'm not sponsored. This is just, I get a lot of questions with which SSH client I'm using. This one's really cool because you can save a lot of the hosts that you're logging into with SSH. So if you have like 4 or 5 systems on your network, you can save them all in here and quickly connect to them. It's really nice, especially if you're using Windows. But if you're using Linux, you can just SSH into it. Uh, but in this guide, I'm going to actually be using Termius. So looks like it's actually having a slight glitch here. So let me, there we go. Okay, so OBS was just for some reason showing an old image of it from the last video, but what we're going to do is I have my host saved here. This is my CM3588. Actually, I need to change the login. So by default, you can log in with root, and you're going to do FA for the password, and then click connect. And then add and continue to add the fingerprint, and now you are logged in. So how I'm going to do this is basically in the background, I have the wiki. In the foreground, I have Termius, and I'm just going to be typing the commands. Sometimes I'll copy and paste them from here, but just know I'll link the wiki in the description of the video so that if you want to just go, if you like text instructions better, it's basically the same thing. But I'm just going to be moving back and forth between the two. So sorry if you can't totally see what I'm doing, but you can always open up the wiki and kind of follow along. So first thing I'm going to do is change that root password because FA is not a good password. So I'm just going to update that. And you can do that with passwd. And then if you do who, you can see that the Pi user is actually logged in. That's because by default, the Pi user logs in automatically. We're going to actually disable that, but you could also update it just to have it log into your own user. Or you could just leave the Pi user and use that user if you want. You can change the password and then just continue to use that. But I'm going to do pkill-u pi, and that should log everything out, kill all the processes for the Pi user. And then I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete that user. I always create my own user. So we're going to do delete user dash dash remove dash home. And that's going to remove everything for that Pi user. And then we'll do add user Hake hardware. And we can see it's going to have UID 1000. And it has a home directory, home/Hake hardware. So everything that I like. Set up your password. And you can just hit enter through all of this. And that's it. You now have the Hake hardware or whatever user you want to create. You can choose whatever username you want. Last thing we're going to do is do user mod-ag, so add group, and we're going to add the user we just created to the sudo group. So now we don't have to log into root to actually run root commands or elevated privileges. You can just use your existing user to do that. So now I'm just going to log into the user that I just created. So I can type exit, and then I can go over here in the credentials, and I actually have a Hake hardware credential already set up, and I'll just click connect. Boom, there we go. I'm logged in as Hake hardware. Next thing we're going to do, if I were to cat etc apt sources.list, actually, I forgot, Ubuntu has Ubuntu sources. So let's apt sources.list.d and then Ubuntu sources. It's using like a .cn mirror, which is probably maybe fine, but I prefer to use the official sources. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to copy this command up here, and I'm just going to paste it in. And what this is basically doing is making a backup of the sources, and then I'm going to create my own sources. So by default, because we did the minimal, we don't have nano installed, which is totally fine. We're just going to use vi. So we're going to copy that command, and then we're basically going to create a new Ubuntu sources file. And you can see it says new down here at the bottom. And I'm going to come up in here and I'm going to just copy the sources. These are like the official ones from the ports.ubuntu.com. So we're going to hit I for insert. I do Control Shift V, and that's for like Termius, how you would paste something in. And then I'm going to hit escape to get out of insert mode, and then :WQ to save and exit. So now we're using the official Ubuntu sources, which is just something that I like to do. And now because we're using the new sources, we can do an update. So we'll just do sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade -y so we don't have any prompts, and let everything get installed. And it shouldn't take too long. Looks like we got about 209 updates. There's actually quite a few things getting upgraded here, so we'll let that run. And once it finishes, we will then add some additional packages. So actually, while that's installing, let's go over the additional packages. We'll get Nano in there. We've got Tmux, which there's like just a short description of each one. Tmux is great if you SSH into your systems a lot, because usually if you SSH in and you have some long running process that's happening and you were to close the terminal, that will actually close your SSH session and stop whatever you were doing. So with Tmux, you can create a persistent session that you can log into and out of, which is really nice. Back up at the top here, htop, that'll give you like RAM usage, CPU usage, all the processes happening, which is kind of nice just to monitor. iftop, that's like htop but for your network. nmap, this is great for if you are trying to diagnose some issue with your network. I use it fairly often just if I'm running into issues with certain things. So these are just some of the additional packages that I install. And then I don't know if I mentioned, but yeah, like Nano, that's the text editor that I prefer. Vi is available, but I am not cool enough to use Vi, and I've just used Nano ever since I've been using Ubuntu and Linux in general. So I'm just going to pre-copy this and head back over into Termius, which is, there's quite a few updates that we're going through here. I can't remember if there's any prompts. Sometimes you might receive a prompt, sometimes you might not. It sort of depends on the scenario. And I don't know if the updates, if we're getting a lot of these updates because I moved back to the official sources, or if it's just kind of an older version of Ubuntu image that FriendlyElec has. Either way, we'll just let this process run through. It is going to take a little bit of time here. So I will, if this starts to take too long, I'll probably just speed it up so you don't have to sit through listening to me fill the time with ramblings. Uh, so, oh, you know what? Actually, while we're waiting, if anybody cares to share, I'm always curious what people are using these CM3588 boards for. I think a lot of people are going to use it for a NAS. Like that's a huge benefit of having the 4 NVMe slots is that you can have like a high-speed NAS. But there's like Proxmox images. Obviously, if you're installing Ubuntu or Debian, like you have some different use case, or maybe you're doing that to create a NAS, but not with Open Media Vault. And Open Media Vault is installed by default, so just curious, feel free to leave a comment with how you're using the CM3588. I have a ton of these, and I'm just curious how other people are using them. Originally, I was using them for a crypto project that needed like an SSD or an NVMe drive. Um, but yeah, just curious what people are using these for. Okay, so the updates are installed. We'll clear. We can paste in those additional packages. And this is why I do the minimal, because I can just install what I need. I don't need to have a bunch of packages that I don't need. Okay, and we can also do sudo apt auto remove. So if there were any specific packages that were installed just as a dependency, looks like we just had one, which is nice. That just clears any of those packages that we don't need anymore. Okay, so as you saw initially, I logged in with the root user. I don't want to SSH, I don't want to allow people to SSH in as the root user. So we're going to modify the SSHD config, and we're just going to go down to the section. I hit page down once, and we're just going to put, we're going to comment out yes for permit root login. And I'm even going to change it to no. Control X, Y, enter. Now root user, nobody can log in via SSH as the root user. We'll just restart SSH here to make those changes take effect. The next thing we're going to do is the host name. So right now it's CM3588. I have a lot of these on the system, so I like to rename the host name to something that is easy to track for me. So I'll do Control Shift V to paste in, but we're basically going to open up the etc hosts file. We're going to go down to the bottom here, and we're going to remove that. And I'm just going to call it Comet. And usually I'll do like Comet 1, Comet 2, depending on how many I have on the system. Right now we're just going to do Comet. Then we'll do Control X, Y, enter. And as you can see, I'm using Nano now. Control X, Y, enter is how we save. I probably didn't mention it for the SSHD config. We do need to change the host name. So one more file. We'll do sudo nano etc host name, and then just delete CM3588, type in Comet or whatever you want, Control X, Y, enter to save. And we'll just do a quick reboot. These things reboot so fast. And we'll see that it no longer says CM3588, it's going to say Comet. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is set the time zone, because by default it's UTC time zone. I like to just have an actual time zone for where I live. All right, we're already back in. So if you do date, time, CTL, time, date, CTL, you can see local time is listed as UTC. I'm not a fan of that. If you're not sure what time zone you need to specify for the next command, you can do a sudo time date CTL list time zones, and you can find, you just hit page down or page up to scroll through these. You can find out what your exactly what you're supposed to put for your time zone. Hit Q to get out of there. Then I usually just hit clear, and then actually add your time zone. So sudo time date CTL set time zone. I'm going to be America Phoenix. And if we do time date CTL again, we can see now that local time is my actual local time. And then if we scroll down just a little bit, we can now set the locales. So if I do locale, we can see it's POSIX, and I want it to be UTF-8 for US or English US. So I'm going to do sudo dpackage reconfigure locales, and then I'll hit page down to go to the en section, and I'll do en us utf8, and then tab to the OK. Scroll down again. I want to have my default for the system environment to be en us utf8. Tab to get to OK, hit enter, and it's going to reconfigure the locales. Now, for that to take effect, we need to just log out of our session and log back in. And then if you do locale, we can see now we're using the one for me. Of course, you would select whatever one works best for you. Okay, disable suspend, which luckily we haven't had it suspend me yet, but I don't want this to automatically suspend the system for inactivity. So I'm just going to copy this command here, but basically we're going to update the GNOME config here. And I'm just going to scroll down. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, so automatic suspend. What we're going to do is on comment that and put it to 0, which that should basically like be enough because 0 is never. But I also do this one. I uncomment this and do blank. And that should be good. So Control X, Y, enter. And then we can update the config. So sudo dconf update and then sudo system ctl restart gdm3. And that should basically apply those settings. And that's it. So you can still use like the desktop environment if you need to log in, but this is how I set up my Ubuntu systems when I'm going to be using them. A lot of times I use Ubuntu because I like it better than Debian for some of the CLI stuff. So I don't use Bookworm Core, which is the CLI version for the CM3588 that they have available by default. I just use Ubuntu and then use it as just a CLI and SSH into it, even though there's a desktop environment. Um, I wish there was an Ubuntu server version available. I might email FriendlyElec and see if they'll create an Ubuntu server version, but either way, hopefully everything is working out for you. Feel free to like or subscribe. I'm going to have some more videos on the CM3588 along with a bunch of Proxmox things. A lot of home lab stuff recently is what I've been doing. So if you want to see some of the new videos, subscribe to get a notification, and I'll see you in the next one.